Hi and welcome. I'm so glad you've joined me. If you are preparing for Strategic Case Study exam in May or August 25 and dealing with Leothayre pre-scene, this video will give you a structured starting point and help you focus your efforts in the right direction. I know that SCS can be a bit daunting. This is your final exam and the stakes are high. You're expected to act like a senior finance professional, thinking strategically, advising the board, and responding to complex, evolving scenarios. But the good news is, you don't have to do it alone. In this video, I'll walk you through some materials that we have prepared to help our students, like you, prepare more confidently and effectively. You'll see some selected clips from our course, starting with the introduction to the case study, your role. From there, we'll move into the commercial overview of the company, highlighting major business features, market positioning, and the internal structure. That's followed by the industry analysis, where we focus on key market trends, competitive dynamics, and even we touch on some frameworks like Porter's 5 forces, so we can give you a stronger commercial context. And then we'll shift into syllabus-driven analysis, where our tutors will dive into few selected issues from each syllabus level paper. So in short, we'll be diving into E3, where we cover mission, vision, and values, and how they support decision-making process. Then we will jump into P3, an exploration of risk management and reputational risk, which is especially relevant given the public-facing nature of the business. And lastly, an analysis of financial risk, particularly in the context of long-term investment and funding in capital-intensive industry. These aren't full lessons. Those are just samples that we cover completely in our course. However, if you are interested in exploring the full syllabus support, pre-scene breakdowns, or marked mocks, you'll find it all on our website. I'll point you in the right direction at the end. But for now, let's jump in and start building your understanding so you can approach the SCS preparation with more clarity, confidence, and purpose.
In this video, we're going to have a look at the CIMA case study exams, exactly what they are and what's expected of you in these exams. Case study exams are very different from the OT exams that you sit at each level. CIMA conducted some research before they last revised their syllabus, and it came through very strongly from employers that what they wanted from their accountants were two things. They wanted them to be technically strong, and that is what the OT exams are designed to test. But they also wanted accountants to be able to function well in the workplace, which is more than just being technically strong. It's their ability to communicate, to recognise and appreciate issues and come up with practical, work-based, commercially astute advice. And this is what the case study is trying to replicate. It's a work-based simulation. So it is not in any way trying to retest the OT exams that you've passed already. It's about putting you in context and seeing if you can function at an appropriate level in the organisation. The strategic case study is the capstone for the qualification. Once you pass this exam, you are fully qualified. So the role that you're expected to play here is that of a senior finance manager. You are a leader in this scenario. Your audience, the people you'll be writing to, will be people on the board, the finance director and board members, or maybe even the board as a whole. So your ability to lead people, to act as a business partner to business leaders is being tested here. Common simulations that you might see would be to advise on a business strategy to create value, so to advise on a long-term course of action, to advise on corporate governance issues, including the evaluation of the control environment and internal control. So you may have to advise the board on their own structure and how they might need to restructure ideally. You may need to evaluate longer-term strategic decisions and how they should be financed. Maybe make a case, a business case for digitisation and talking about the pros and cons of digitising the business. And you need to consider a wide range of stakeholders and the impact that decisions have on that wide range of stakeholders. So you need to consider the ethical implications of the decisions that you're proposing. So You are a senior finance manager in this case. You're advising the board, the organisation's leaders, on putting together that long-term business strategy to create value, paying due attention to the organisation's environment, its ecosystem. And risk management will be a significant part of this, so thinking what could go wrong, including cyber risks, because digitisation and the risks associated with that, as well as the opportunities associated with that, are at the heart of every single paper these days in the CIMA qualification. There'd be a duty to advise at this level on corporate governance matters, because these are the people you're speaking to, the people who are governing the organisation. Reputational risks arise from poor governance, as well as the impact that it has on internal control and the well-being of internal and external stakeholders if boards are badly structured or badly managed. So as part of that, you would be frequently involved in ensuring the control environment within the organisation and making sure that internal audit are operating well in making sure that control environment is fit for purpose. So the need to manage control is crucial given increasing dangers arising from cyber risks and cyber security. The frequent requirement to support strategic decision making might require the formulation of models and other methods of justifying and legitimating decisions. So in other words, you need to be able to explain why you think a certain course of action is the best one to go for. The senior finance manager will be involved in raising finance from suitable sources in order to ensure that the new strategic projects are adequately resourced. So you might be asked to discuss various different potential sources and to appraise those sources, not so much in terms of detailed calculations, but practically which sources would be suitable in one circumstance compared to another. The business case for digitisation and the manner in which the entity creates partnerships for ensuring strategic success need to be understood. So in other words, how do we relate to our stakeholders, our collaborators, our fellow collaborators in the ecosystem that we work with, for example? And we must understand how the operation of capital markets play a part in determining the value of our business. So this senior finance manager advises on matters that involve considerable judgment. And as a general sort of statement here, in many ways, the strategic case study, in many ways, is the least technical of the three, believe it or not, because what's really being tested here is leadership, commercial acumen, your ability to help people making those long-term decisions. It's positioning you as an internal business advisor or internal business partner. So that's naturally going to involve the application of judgment and explaining your judgment, explaining why you think certain things should be done a certain way. Because what we're doing here could have a significant effect on the stakeholders of the business. So related to that, we need to consider the ethical impact of decisions that we are supporting. We also need to behave ourselves ethically. So we will be applying the CIMA ethical framework to our own work during the course of executing our responsibilities. The 5 core activities being assessed at this strategic case study are, first of all, your role in developing a business strategy in the first place, evaluating the business ecosystem and environment and seeing what role we have to play in that and how that environment works and affects us. And recommending various different financing strategies. So do we finance by debt? Do we finance by equity? What type of debt? What type of equity? And so on, and why? Evaluating and mitigating risk, thinking about what could go wrong with certain strategies, appreciating that we're not here trying to eliminate risk, but manage it to an acceptable level, and recommend and maintain a sound control environment. Now, when you pass this exam, you're finished, you're qualified, you'll be a member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. Now, the format of the strategic case study exam is a little bit different to ones you will have seen before, as we'll see. You're still given a pre-scene pack of information that's released a few weeks before the exam, and the idea with that pre-scene is that it gives you some background on a particular business in a particular industry. It's there to prepare you for the exam day. You don't need to read around that pre-scene massively. A little bit doesn't hurt. But the purpose of that pre-scene is to make sure that everyone that goes into the case study exam is coming from the same level starting point. So when you get that pre-scene, you need to read it, understand it, get to know it, think about the issues that it suggests, and maybe think about the E, P, and F implications of the information we're being given. If there are some financial numbers given in there, which there always is, then you could do some analysis on those. But the purpose of that analysis is not to be able to splurge out a load of numbers on exam day. The analysis is there to just point to the issues that might be relevant when it comes to the real exam. Now, that real exam is 3 one-hour sections, as opposed to 4 45-minute sections that you will have seen before. Each of those sections are equally weighted. There will be several subtasks within each section. You'll notice they're called tasks, not questions. That reflects the fact that they are it's part of a work-based simulation. Each subtask can and often does examine more than one syllabus area. So you could be asked to talk about the opportunities and risks associated with something that could pull even from the E paper and the P paper, all within one subtask. Now, this next point is important. I'm no doubt you're aware of this already, but you cannot bank time. So you'll be given 1 hour for your first section. And when you move on from that section, if you move on early, you can't bank any time. So if you finish that first section in 55 minutes, you can't carry that 5 minutes forward to the next section. It's just lost. So there is no point finishing any section early. If you finish a couple of minutes early, use that couple of minutes to just polish, even if that means improving the format of what's on the screen in front of you. Formats will be required when you're answering the questions. That could be, for example, emails, memos, reports, and briefing notes, and so on. And again, that's just reflecting the fact that this is a work-based simulation. Now, it's important when you're replying, therefore, that you more or less get a format reasonably correct. So if you're doing a report, to, from, subject, date, introduction, conclusion, and sign off, make it fairly formal. But what's important is the tone. So if you're writing internal emails and memos, they will be less formal than if you're writing a report to the board, for example. So bear that in mind. Your ability to communicate effectively is being examined here. So getting the tone right and the logical flow right within the format that's required is important. You're provided with a word processor to use on the exam day, which is available for you to play with in some test software on the CIMA website. And I would recommend that when you're practicing questions, you focus on using the software on the CIMA website to make sure you're completely used to it by the time you get to the exam. You won't be asked to do any detailed calculations. In fact, you may be asked to do no calculations at all on the day. The detailed calculations have already been examined in the OT papers. So you might be asked to interpret some calculations, talk about what they mean, or critique the assumptions behind them, or talk about some of the non-financial consequences of those calculations and so on. But there won't be much in the way of detailed calculations. I'm not saying leave your calculator at home. Never hurts to have a calculator nearby. But it's unlikely that you'll need to use it much, if at all, in the exam. Equally, you're provided with standard tables, present value, cumulative present value, normal distribution tables. But it's rare that you actually need to use them.
So in this video, we're going to focus on Leothayre itself. So this video and the next few videos, we're going to look at specifically how Leothayre positions itself within the industry, and also specifics on its operations, such as its mission, vision, board of directors, and so on. So let's now discuss specifically how Leothayre operates. So the company, you already know, provides a complete satellite service for its clients, and it specializes in small satellites. So it currently doesn't serve the larger satellites, but just the small satellites. And it offers the complete service from initial consultation to know what the client needs are, to actually designing, manufacturing, and launching, and as well as the operation of the satellite. Remember, we spoke about having ground spacers that can communicate with the satellite. So Leothayre does the operation of the satellite as well. So therefore, Leothayre has engineers, and these engineers have the knowledge, they have the experience to meet with the client, to analyze what the client's mission is, what their purpose for wanting to send a satellite is, and they are able to recommend solutions to the client. So this obviously tells us that they have a lot of expertise. In addition, Leothayre has workshops that have the expertise, the staff, as well as the equipment to design and build small satellites. So remember, this is a specialized area. This is something you have to do well. You have to, for an example, make sure that the satellite is designed and built in a way that can survive in the vacuum-like system in space. So the components have to be robust. They have to fit. They have to be fit for the purpose. So as you go through this, I'm sure you can understand that there are certain risks. In addition, we have to thoroughly test each satellite before its launch to ensure it is reliable and can operate once in orbit. So therefore, Leothayre also has extensive test facilities to test the satellites. Now, one aspect, we don't operate our own rockets. So that is the aspect in which we actually, instead of having our own rockets, we work closely with partners who launch these services. So for an example, we negotiate slots on behalf of our clients so that they can send their satellites to orbit. But sometimes there are some clients who can launch it themselves, or they can arrange for that facility themselves. Then we simply deliver the completed satellite. So that again is a point, the fact that we don't operate our own rockets. This might expose us to certain risks. We have to depend on the launch provider to make sure that they launch the rocket. I think we spoke about this in the previous video, how launching the rocket itself is a task that has to be done with care so that the rocket can be launched with the necessary pressure to go into orbit. So that again is an area that might be risky because we have to depend on external parties. Then at Leothayre, we provide the ground stations to control the mission once the satellites are in orbit. So we have our own ground stations, we own them and we operate them, and we have specialized equipment. Further, the precinct goes on to state that a typical mission, from consulting to identify the client's needs to actually launching the satellite, takes around 1 to 1.5 years. So you can see it's not a small project. It tends to be a larger project. Often we will work with our clients over a span of 1.5 years. But however, if they want repeat builds, we know their needs, and now we just have to build the satellite. It can be done much shorter, within around a span of 4 to 6 months. The precinct further goes on to state that we have a standardized satellite, which is called the Leothayre standard, which is basically the CubeSat model we spoke about in the industry part of the precinct. So this is standardized and it's supplied as 3U, 6U or 12U configurations to clients. Now this standardized nature of the satellite helps make it easier to quickly build a satellite for a client rather than designing the satellite from scratch. But I'm sure we also are willing to design the satellite from scratch if the client needs. Then we're also given information on how many satellites have been successfully launched up to date. So we have launched 64 satellites. Now, if you look at from when we began our operations in 2004 to then when we were quoted in 2017, if you look at 2004, we have been in operation for a little over 20 years. 2017 makes us a very new company that's quoted, not even 8 years, about 8 years. So therefore, it would seem that we launch about only a very few satellites every year, maybe about 3 satellites. If you look at from the time of inception, we would be launching about 3. Possibly in the beginning, we didn't even launch 3 satellites a year. But you can see that overall, the projects we deal with tend to be longer. And that's why we might only have a few projects we do in a given year. But the other question is, have there been any launches that were unsuccessful? Now, your pre-scene doesn't give information about this, but that is also something to consider. Then your pre-scene further goes on to state, it also has a substantial number of orders awaiting fulfillment. That means we probably have seen a rise in demand, and now we are working towards the fulfillment of these orders. And our clients come from different countries. So the fact they come from different countries, as you would see when we talk about our risk, this would imply that we would be exposed to currency risk, foreign currency risk, given that they come from different countries. And further, the pre-scene goes on to say that customers like us because we have an excellent reputation for meeting deadlines and achieving mission objectives. Now, that's a good thing for us, that we obviously want to keep up with that reputation we have. We want to keep meeting deadlines on time and mission objectives as well. So basically, what did we discuss in this video? We discussed what Leothayre offers within the industry. So it designs, builds, and manages satellite missions, but it does not launch its own rockets. And Leothayre has a standard satellite. Mostly, it's the CubeSat configurations. Now, what opportunities do this reveal to us? One is, by having a standardized satellite, we'll be able to manage costs better because we can quickly meet customer demands, maybe make some changes, but meet their needs faster, so greater efficiency is possible. Then also, if you look at our operations, given that we have a good reputation, customers like us, this is an opportunity now to expand, take it to the next step, expand into mid-sized satellite building. But of course, there is risk. For an example, since we offer a standardized CubeSat in the form of Leothayre standard, this can be easily offered by competitors too. So the uniqueness of it might be lacking or might not be there, and therefore this would make it easier for competitors to also win the same contracts. And also the fact that some clients might want unique projects, which I'm sure we could offer, but given that we mainly do, it seems like the standardized version, it might require more work, and this might also expose us to further risk. So now, as we have discussed the basics, I think this video was really giving you context as to how Leothayre fits in within the industry. So, how we fit in within the industry, what we offer as a part is what we discussed in this video. So I hope you understood it and you clearly grasped the facts relating to the video as it is a vital piece of information you need to understand. By now, if you have gone through your pre-scene, you are familiar with what industry it is in. But in this video, we're going to go deeper into the industry so that you can fully familiarize yourself with the industry, the key trends, the risk, and even what the future of the industry holds. So we're going to take into account a number of different factors. We're going to give you key pieces of information relating to the industry so that, in fact, you can use this information and incorporate it in your answers so that the quality of your answers can be improved. And that, at the end of the day, will be the main focus. So therefore, the contents of our video today will comprise of, we're going to look at an overview of the industry. We're going to focus on the basics so that you get an understanding of an industry from a helicopter view, as it was. Then we're going to focus on some specific trends of the industry. Some will be general market trends. Some will be specific technological trends. Then we'll look at some of the key success factors within the industry that, in effect, Leothayre has to keep to if it is to succeed. Then some challenges and solutions to these challenges. Next, we'll look at Porter's 5 forces. So this will help us position Leothayre within the industry, position ourselves as a company, as a competitor within the industry. Finally, we're going to just talk about some real-world companies. We will not go in depth. This is basically your homework. I want you to go to the websites of these companies. There is interesting aspects relating to the satellite industry, the products they offer. So go through them on your own and really see what can Leothayre learn from this. Finally, we'll wrap up our video by discussing the news and events. So let's get into the content of the video. So first, the industry overview. Now, the industry, based on your hypothetical pre-scene, the industry is said to expand. The industry is expanding with currently 10,000 operational satellites in orbit, and this is expected to increase to 70,000 over the next decade. So we can see that the industry is growing. The demand is likely going to be enhanced within the next decade. And this is because of 2 main reasons. Number 1, launch cost is reducing. Number 2, the number of applications in which satellite technology is used is increasing. So coupled by these two, it can be expected that as a company, Leothayre should see increase in demand. Now, the specific segment that's seeing growth is the segment we operate within, which is the segment of small satellites. This is because they are cost effective and they are easier to launch compared to larger satellites. Now, if you look at the real world information given from the internet, you will notice that the market was valued at USD around 18 billion in 2024. It's expected to grow by 12.3% at a compound annual growth rate of 12.3% by 2030 expected. So that means, again, even the real world information depicts that we can expect demand to increase and for the industry to grow. So that's a positive aspect as a company within the industry. Further, the number of satellites launched are expected to grow as well. So all predicaments of the growth to come. If you look at the industry overview in terms of the satellite types and their users. So one is satellites are categorized by number one, their mass. So they could be from large satellite to as small as femto satellites. So this is the smallest. It's even smaller than micro and nano satellites. And of course, micro and nano is becoming more popular. So the more smaller satellites are becoming more popular. Now, smaller satellites are being standardized to standardized sizes, such as examples given are the CubeSat and the Pocket Cubes. So these are growing in popularity for many reasons. One is they're smaller, they're easier to launch, and also the fact that it's standardized makes it possible to integrate it with launch vehicles, which is basically rockets. So satellites serve for a number of missions, including missions for communication, navigation, and even Earth observation. So therefore, the application of satellites is something that will continue to be needed. If you look at the scope of the industry or the scope of the satellite industry, it comprises of designing satellites, manufacturing satellites, then launching the satellites to orbit, and operation and providing ground station services. So if you look at this, except for really launching, we provide all the other services. Launching is the aspect we currently do not do. We need to work with external partners to launch the satellites. But other than that, we design. So the design is when you create a blueprint for the satellite. You understand the demand for the satellite. You understand the mission requirements. You understand what kind of material should be used. You understand the components. And you build sort of a basic outline of how the satellite should be manufactured. Then the next stage is manufacturing. So this is basically based on design specifications, you actually construct the satellite. So this is when you assemble it, you create its body, you have a source of energy for it to derive energy from, so either solar panels or batteries, and you have communication equipment attached to it. So then once it's designed and manufactured, it needs to be launched. So this is when you transport it to the orbit, and this is typically done using rockets, which can vary in size, vary in capacity, depending on the size of the satellite. So what you should keep in mind is when it's launching, very often, especially with small satellites like the CubeSat, you would launch a number of satellites at once. You do not launch just one. So a number of satellites will be launched at once. Then once it's launched, you need to operate it to get the needed information to perform the intended functions. So you will manage it, you will collect the data, you will transmit the data, you make needed adjustments. And then there is collaboration and coordination. So this is integrating the various activities, collaborating with various stakeholders to make use of the data, and using ground station operators to ensure the mission remains successful. So it's very important you understand this scope, you understand the full scope of the industry. Understanding this will help you see from start to end the role Leothayre plays as a company within the industry. You understand what aspects do we provide our services on, which, like I mentioned, all activities except the fact that launching we need to work with an external partner. Then we come to the end users. So the end users can be, number one, government agencies. A lot of satellites are used for defense purposes. You will see this in the news article section, especially how governments would use satellites. They would use it even as a part of planning their defense strategy to be able to mitigate any possible missiles or attacks to the country through the use of satellites. Then large corporations such as the telecommunication industry, agriculture, oil and gas. Again, they will use missiles to whether to communicate, whether to observe certain phenomena, or to collect data. Then educational institutes such as universities will use it for scientific research. Hobbyists and private researchers, so those who might simply have a hobby or they have a personal project they want to work on for research, will use it. And of course, communication service providers will use it for widespread, for an example, internet coverage in areas where there is a lack of terrestrial infrastructure. So therefore, these are the end users. And what's interesting to note is that consumers, if you talk about consumer behavior in conjunction with the industry, consumers are demanding for cost-effective and reliable satellite solutions. So therefore, it's very important that satellites launched are reliable. So that's a downfall, I would say, or that's a little bit of a risk with small satellites, because small satellites tend to be less reliable compared to the larger ones. This because they tend to sometimes, because of their movement, sometimes you might not get reliable data in certain instances. So that's something to keep in mind. Moving on, the competitive landscape seems competitive, even though it seems an industry which has barriers for new competitors to enter within the industry, because you're fighting to secure a few international clients, because here your clients are not going to be a lot. It has to be most of the time a big international organization that would want to have satellites sent on a mission. So therefore, your clients tend to be a small group of high-end clients. So you're fighting for them. So it tends to be a bit competitive in getting these contracts. So how can we win these contracts? Number one, like with any industry, we need to differentiate ourselves through innovation, reliability, and by providing comprehensive services. So in essence, to summarize the basic industry overview, a wide range of end users use satellites. The scope of the industry includes designing, manufacturing satellites, launching them, and operating them. And then what the future of the satellite industry is, it's going to grow. Future demand will likely grow, and the growth will be encouraged as a result of technological advancements, environmental sustainability related matters, and regulatory compliance. So these can bring about both positive and negative impacts to our operations. And then when you think about it, the industry will grow, and as it grows, we can benefit from it as a company within the industry. So now let's focus on the market trends. So if you look at the market trends, number one of the biggest drivers for the growth of satellites is the need or the demand for data. As we live in a modern age, it's called the age of digital technology, age of data. People's communication needs are growing. There is a growing demand for communication, not just locally, but globally. So there is a need for global communication networks through internet, mobile services. Now, to be able to accomplish this, you need to have a well-established satellite constellation, different satellite constellations to make sure that you can access the internet, mobile services, even in remote and isolated areas. Next, information related to observing the Earth, to identify the precise information relating to the Earth, to use that information for agriculture, urban planning. Need for data is growing, and this need is met greatly by the use of satellites. Another aspect that's propelling the demand for satellites is the fact that launching satellites have become more affordable. As rocket technology has enhanced, there is a reduction in launch cost. So it makes it more possible, or it makes it possible for a broader range of customers or clients. So earlier, as satellites were first developed, launched into orbit, it was mainly demanded by governments. So it was the big clients. But now, even smaller organizations such as agricultural firms, oil rigs, are able to send their own satellites so that they can benefit from it, or even a construction company. So therefore, the reduction in cost is now enabling a broader range of customers. So this is really an opportunity for us, an opportunity to grow to cater to different customers. And also economies of scale. Like we said, given that there is small satellites, you can deploy the satellites together. By sending a lot of satellites at once, the cost can be reduced. The operating cost can be reduced, and there is economies of scale. So as the launch cost is declining, demand is increasing. So it's basically the fact that demand increasing, launch cost is decreasing. So again, encouraging demand. This results in more satellites being sent. And if it's more satellites, this brings down the cost. Especially when it comes to launching the satellite. So the launch cost comes down, overall cost comes down. So then we can look at the Porter's 5 forces for the industry. So number 1, threat of new entrants, moderate. Now, it's a very capital intensive industry. You need to make a lot of capital investment, significant capital investment to begin a business or a company like this. So therefore, this complex capital investment, along with the specialized technical expertise from engineers, the compliance needed, the complex regulatory frameworks, of course, is a good deterrent of new entrants. And at the same time, the fact that established companies maintain economies of scale, which new companies find it hard to compete with, again acts as a deterrent. So therefore, I would say the threat of new entrants is moderate to low because of all these factors. But if there are new entrants or there are new competitors, the best way we can handle the competition from them is strengthening our brand, increasing the efficiency of our operations so that they find it hard to compete with our prices, we offer our clients, and of course invest in new technologies, cutting edge technologies, which again would make it difficult for them to compete in. So the first one is issues relating to the mission, vision, and values of the company. Now, your pre-scene very clearly gives you the mission, the vision, the values. Now, why do you think your pre-scene gives this? The short answer of this is they want you to use it. They want you to use it. And why it becomes relevant is because you are at the strategic level. At the strategic level, the mission, the vision, the values play a big role in the decisions you make, in the strategies you adopt. So therefore, you need to be understanding our mission, understanding our vision and our values, and be ready to both act in alignment with our core mission, vision, and values. At the same time, understand areas where our mission, vision, and values can improve on, and at the same time, certain instances in which we might be deviating from our core strategic mission, vision, and values. So you can see our mission is to lead in the creation of an operation of satellites that meet the needs of clients. So first of all, we are talking about meeting the needs of clients for space facilities, and we have to lead in the creation and operation of satellites. So two very important aspects, both in leading and in meeting the needs. So it doesn't matter if we are leading in the creation and operation of satellites, if we are not actually creating satellites which meet the needs of clients. So this talks about indirectly the very important need for customization, not just producing standardized satellites, but even if we produce standardized satellites, we need to customize them to meet individual client needs. Our vision, Leothayre's vision is to provide space-based facilities that can enhance the quality of life on Earth. So, this means we need to invest on space facilities, so investment is required. So this might also mean a natural push towards maybe having our own rockets to meet the space facilities requirement and enhance the quality of life on Earth. So therefore, innovation, research, development all become a part of our vision. Now, when it comes to values, we're talking about excellence, innovation, fairness and respect at the workplace, strong relationship with clients, and integrity that is related to ethics. So we need to make sure that our dealings on a day-to-day basis make sure that we are ethical, we treat our employees, we innovate, and we try to ensure excellence in the decisions we make. With that in mind, what are the possible issues? Number one, briefly evaluate the relevance of our current mission. So you need to take our current mission, you need to evaluate it in line with the ideals of a mission. What should a mission address? Whether it fulfills the purpose of our existence, whether it is in alignment with the industry we are operating within. All of this, you need to evaluate our mission in line with all of that, whether our mission is good, whether we need to improve it. So when you talk about evaluation, talk about the good and the bad. The good and bad, and give your comments. Next, identify if our current business values meets the main purpose of the organization. So the purpose of the organization is communicated through the mission and vision. So is our core values addressing our mission and vision? So some exercise for you to do. You can go back, look at the core aspects brought out in our mission and vision, then review it in line with our values and see if our values meets our mission and vision. Next, evaluate a course of action in light of our mission statement. So you might be given, maybe for an example, a good example of this is we might be told that we are going to create standardized satellites, which we already do, and we're going to simply sell it. We're going to reduce the customization. We're going to maybe make it a premium product, premium area of satellite design and building. But for now, we're going to just simply do standardize for a majority of clients and offer it. Now, will that meet the mission's requirement for meeting the needs of clients? Possibly not, because even though they send a satellite, it might not particularly deal with their specific needs. So that is aspects related to the mission, vision, and values. So I hope you spend some time to really understand how our mission and vision is, and what is our focus, and how our values translate to achieving our mission and vision.
So let's start with risk management. So as identified in our risk register, we are exposed to numerous risks, and it is essential that we manage them effectively. Yes. So if you remember in the pre-C, a risk register has been given, right? So the main risks has been identified there. So first of all, let's look at key principles and benefits of ERM, or enterprise risk management, right? So enterprise risk management is a process of identifying, assessing, and managing risks in a company, right? So there are different principles in ERM, right? So things like risk management being an integral part of an organization's strategic planning process. And then risks should be identified and evaluated on a continuous basis. That is very important, right? And risks should also be assessed in terms of their potential impact on the company's goals and objectives. Another very important factor to remember there. If you look at the benefits of ERM, benefits of enterprise risk management, right? ERM would lead to improved decision making. So the company would be able to, or the board of directors would be able to make better decisions. It also enhances accountability. In addition, it also increases resilience of the company, because enterprise risk management helps to anticipate and prepare for risks. Then it also helps with better resource allocation. So with the use of ERM, a company would be able to identify the most important resources. Therefore, they would be able to enhance their resource allocation. And of course, by doing all of this, they would be able to, or a company would be able to have improved reputation, because they would be able to minimize risks as much as possible. Then if we look at risk identification methods, right? So how can we identify risks in a company? First of all, we can have risk identification workshops where we get people together, right? And then we brainstorm and try to come up with risks. And then of course, we have to maintain a risk register. That's very important, right? And assessing all the risks, right? So looking at different risks, their likelihood, their impact, looking at all of that is also important. And then internal audit reviews are also important, because that would help, right? So basically that the internal audit teams can review the organization's operations, and they can identify potential risks, right? And then they can also look at the internal controls within the company to avoid those risks or minimize those risks and see how effective they are. There can also be external reviews, right? So we can have external consultants coming in to conduct independent reviews. Industry research can also be really helpful, because there can be some risks that are inherent to the industry. This industry research would help with that, right? So then in the exam, there can also be questions directly or indirectly looking at the role of the risk committee. So rather, what does the risk committee do? So the risk committee establish risk management policies, right? So it's their duty to establish risk management policies, and then they also oversee risk management activities. They also review and assess risks, right? That is also a part of their duty. And then they report to the board, right? So the risk committee would look at all of these different risks and they would report to the board. They also would evaluate risk management performance, right? So they look at how well the company is performing in terms of risk management programs that has been implemented. In addition, another very important role of the risk committee is to support a risk-aware culture within the organization, right? That way, all the employees and everybody within the organization would be aware of how important risks are for the company, or the risk management is for the company. So that is how a risk committee would function, right? So knowing that would be helpful for you if you get a question from this area in the exam. Then we can look at reputational risk, right? So one of our major suppliers has been exposed as a company using child labor and paying extremely low wages to its workers. So this is going to be a problem, right? You can understand. So in the exam, they can ask you, okay, what is the possible ethical dilemma? So as soon as it's a question regarding an ethical dilemma, you always have to use the CIMA Code of Ethics to answer such questions. Of course, the CIMA Code of Ethics has integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and then professional behavior. So first of all, you need to read all the information given in the unseen and then in the reference materials as well, right? So you will be able to gather more information about the situation here. Then using the information given there, you have to understand, okay, what is the ethical principle? What principle in the CIMA Code of Ethics is going to get violated here or is being violated here? Is it integrity, objectivity, right? Professional behavior or professional competence and due care? Which one is the problem here, right? When you understand that, of course, then you can go on from there, right? So in a question like this, you always have to use the CIMA Code of Ethics to structure your answer. So you have to use that as the theme of your answer, basically, and then you can give practical solutions, right? That's the most important thing. So causes of reputational damage. Again, you have to look at the unseen and the reference materials given, and then you have to come up with very practical answers, right? So don't just write generic answers. Always ensure that any causes of reputational damage you mention are relevant to the given context. Very, very important when dealing with a question like this, right? And then how are you going to manage the reputational risk? Again, you have to give practical answers. Looking at the situation that's there, you need to ensure that the answers you give are really practical and are able to actually help solve or at least mitigate the issue that is there.
The first examinable area we're going to have a close look at is financial risk. So at the strategic level, your examiner loves to test you on financial risk, or basically risk. So from an F3 perspective, risk relates to financial risk. So you have political risk, interest rate related risk, and currency risk under financial risk. So your examiner could ask you different questions based on these types of risk, and that's what we're going to discuss now. So the first aspect is, assuming we are wanting to expand and we are evaluating the financial risk of expansion, possibly to a new country. Number one, how can we assess our exposure to political risk and how can we manage the risk? So how do we assess exposure? So you need to understand that there are different ways we might assess exposure. We might assess it using, there might be political ranking tables such as the Euromoney magazine tables. We can look at the simple macroeconomic condition of the country, the macroeconomy, just looking at the macroeconomic variables such as what is the interest rate, what is the currency exchange, is it fluctuating, what are the income levels, what's the business confidence, so what is unemployment levels. So we can look at all the macroeconomic factors. Then we can look at political ranking tables to see how the country is doing. We might look at the current government because that relates to political environment. Look at how stable is it? What's the attitude towards foreign investments such as ours? What's been the history of the country? Is it known as a country to be politically stable? Or is it possible that there can be an upheaval? What are the attitudes of people? And we can also get professional advice from consultants to get a further, if we are still not sure, we can get a further assessment from professionals. So, assuming we now know that there is some political risk, how do we manage this risk? So, of course, managing this risk, where possible, we can do prior negotiations. For an example, if the country doesn't seem so friendly towards foreign investments, can we negotiate something? So negotiation might come into play, and this should be prior, not when we come to the country, but before making an investment. We can structure our investment in a way that risk is minimized. We can go for a joint venture with a local company instead of directly making 100% of the investment. We can look for other ways to minimize, maybe for an example, some of the macroeconomic risk, such as using local financing, local employees, maybe part ownership. So a lot of different ways to eliminate some of the risk we spoke about. So you need to look at some of the risk, think about some of the political risk, and then how to manage it. Next, evaluate the different types of currency risk and how they can be managed. So in terms of currency risk, number one, you want to talk about economic risk, then transaction risk, and translation risk. So then you need to think about how these are managed. So economic risk is any business will face this risk. So that is economic variables changing between countries. You are exposed to economic risk. So the best way to manage economic risk is diversifying your operations so that even if you're making losses on one segment, you can make a profit in another. Marketing, sales, to promote your product, to promote what we are selling. Or in our case, since we're selling something more high level, satellites, directly market to the companies who might be interested, because our end customers will likely be businesses. So directly market to them. Then when it comes to transaction risk, this is risk due to a difference between the date of the transaction and the settlement date of funds. How do we manage this? Hedging. Internal and external hedging is the best way to deal with this risk, which we'll go into detail. And then translation risk. It's when we have foreign subsidiaries, which might be the case if we expand abroad to any country. So here it's not a real risk, so we cannot really manage it. It's just a risk in the financial statements.
If you're feeling a bit overwhelmed with everything you need to cover, don't worry. We've created structured, tutor-led packages to take the guesswork out of the SCS preparation. Starting with the Essential package, this gives you our full pre-scene analysis set, theory revision materials, and 3 high-quality mocks with 15 standalone tasks. It's perfect if you want to practice independently, but still follow a proven study plan. The Advanced package gives you even more. It includes 5 full mocks and personalized marking for one of them. Plus, we add a special video covering the key pre-scene issues our tutors believe are most likely to appear in your exam. That insights alone can really sharpen your focus. The Master package is our most popular. You'll get 6 mocks and marking services for 3 of them, along with everything from the Advanced package, including the key issues video. But here's what really sets it apart. You'll also get access to our exclusive repository of past exam questions, organized by paper, E3, P3, and F3. This is a treasure trove for past examiner trends, phrasing, and recurring topics. It's like having an examiner's playbook. Finally, our Ultimate package gives you all of that, plus service of 5 markings of mocks, and 3 personal one-on-one tutor sessions. If you want full accountability and expert guidance, this one is for you. You can browse the packages and enroll directly at practicetestacademy.com/SCS. And no matter which option you choose, you'll be following the structured 7-week plan we covered earlier in this video. That's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Stay focused, follow the plan, and I'll be cheering you on the exam day. Goodbye for now.